You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. I hope you all are well. So I have a fascinating one for you this week. We are talking all about pain with pain psychologist and author of the new book, Tell Me Where It Hurts, Dr. Rachel Zoffness. And I have been fascinated with pain for many, many years because we know that pain is not simply the product of tissue injury. I have been to pain lectures where the speaker will show a spinal cord that has so many bulging discs and other injuries, you would think the person was bedridden, but they're walking around happy as a clam. And on the flip side, you see people who are racked with pain and the doctors cannot find a reason why. People have pain in limbs they no longer have. Women are disproportionately affected by chronic pain than men. They not only experience pain more frequently and intensely, but their symptoms also tend to last longer. Why? Well, Rachel is here this week with some answers. She unpacks the biopsychosocial elements of pain, what dials pain up, what dials it down, and how to create your own low pain recipe for living. Because though pain is never all in your head, it does start in your brain, and it's impacted by myriad factors, from your history to your culture to your past trauma, to your emotions. We could go on, and we do. This is a fascinating one. I highly recommend checking out her website, Zoffness.com, and her book. I will put links to those in the show notes. You can check them out for yourself. I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. All right, before we get to it, give us a follow at Feisty Menopause on Instagram and Facebook. Come on in and join our private Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group for conversations 24/7. And head into the show notes and sign up for my free Feisty 40 Plus newsletter with all the training news you can use. If you like this show, please share it with a friend and take a second to drop some stars on your favorite podcast app. It really helps others to find us. Do not forget, we have our first ever Feisty Fest in September coming up. I'm going to be there. Kate Verno is going to be there. All kinds of people are going to be there. We're going to be playing pickleball and swimming and trail running and riding bikes and racing on the track. You know, not technically racing, but you get the idea. It's going to be a great time. So head into the show notes and check out that too. Sign up. I want to see you this September. And very quick before we get to it, thank you to Cozy Earth for your continued support of the show. Being cozy with super soft blankets and towels and bed sheets most definitely helps ease any pain you've got, and Cozy Earth literally has you covered. Thank you, Cozy Earth, for your support. And with that, enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. All right, Rachel, welcome to Hit Play Not Pause. As I said before I hit record, I'm really excited for this conversation because I think it's something that is so common, pain, and so important, and unbelievably still so little understood.
True, and so important for women to understand pain in particular. We are the ones going through childbirth, having menstrual cycles, going through menopause. And I feel like women in particular are disproportionately told that pain is all in their heads or it's just emotional. So lots of work to be done in this space.
There sure is. There sure is. So let's lay some level set groundwork. You say, as we just introduced, that pain has been deeply misunderstood. And let's hold up your book because you do have Tell Me Where It Hurts. That is the book that we're talking about today.
It's the book we're talking about.
Yeah, we are. So you say pain has been deeply misunderstood, and it isn't just a signal from injured tissue, which is how we tend to think about it, but something the brain creates from a mix of ingredients. For people who have only heard pain equals damage, how do you start that conversation?
Great. You said it beautifully. So we have all been sold a big fat lie. We have been told that pain is a purely biomedical problem, something to do just with anatomy and physiology, that requires a primarily, if not exclusively, biomedical solution, usually in the form of pills and procedures. Now, while it is easy to believe that pain lives exclusively in the body part that hurts, science tells us that isn't actually true. Ultimately, pain is constructed by the brain. One of the reasons we know this is because of a condition called phantom limb pain. And phantom limb pain occurs when someone loses a limb, an arm or a leg, and they continue to have terrible pain in the missing body part. Now, if you can have terrible leg pain in a leg that is no longer attached to your body, that tells us pretty definitively that pain must be constructed somewhere else. And we know that somewhere else is the brain. And I want to give you a kicker here. The parts of the brain that make emotions also make pain. So like I know. So people have heard of the limbic system, the amygdala. Those are critical parts, not just of the emotion machinery, but also of the pain machinery. So people like to say to me like, oh, are we talking about physical pain or emotional pain? And because of the neuroscience, now I just nod my head and I say yes, because physical pain affects emotional pain. Emotional pain affects physical pain. And I said at the outset that women are disproportionately told that our pain is all in our heads. And I want to say clearly, very clearly, that is never, ever true. Never. Like pain is never purely emotional. It's never purely physical. It's always both.
So let's take that phantom limb pain as an example there, because I've always understood until I started diving a little deeper into this too a while back, as pain is sort of this alarm system, right? It's like it's a message to your body that something is wrong. Are you still feeling, because I know people who are amputees and they tell me about how they still feel pain in those limbs that are not there. And is that because their brain is just so traumatized from it and they're still saying that something is wrong? Like, do we understand that yet?
Yeah. I'm going to give the most annoying answer in science and medicine, which is it depends on the person in front of you. So for some people, they're experiencing significant stump pain. So there's like still some tissue damage or like issues with the actual part of the body that was amputated. With other people, like I had a patient who had his arm amputated and he was having chronic hand pain. So he was feeling the phantom hand that wasn't there anymore. He was experiencing it cramping and spasming, but like he had no hand, but he could feel it. So the reason for that, we do know the science of it. It's really cool. We have in our brain what's called a homunculus. I happen to love that word.
I love that word.
I know. And sometimes I'll ask my patients, especially like the kids and the teenagers, to draw me what they think a homunculus looks like. And it always somehow looks like part rhinoceros. I'm not sure why. Yeah, a homunculus. So the homunculus is a map of your entire body that lives in your brain. It's a sensory motor map that lives in your brain of your entire body. So if I said to you right now, Celine, sense into your right foot, just feel where it is. You don't have to move it or do anything. Can you feel your sock on your skin? Can you feel your foot on the floor? Can you feel sensation in your feet? You can do that. One of the reasons you can do that is because of your homunculus. So when we have an amputation, sometimes the map of our body that lives in the brain does get stuck in danger mode. Because like you said, pain is our body's danger system. It's our warning detection system. It tells us something might be wrong, you need to pay attention. But sometimes after a traumatic event, like losing a limb in an accident, the brain can get stuck in danger mode. And there are a lot of methods that we can use to get the brain unstuck that are very successful for phantom limb pain. But what's so fascinating is those strategies target the brain.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to ask you right now, because we talked about it right before I hit record. We do know that women who have had trauma, past trauma, high ACE scores with adverse childhood experiences tend to have a rougher time in menopause. And you said, ask me about that. So I'm asking, while we're talking about trauma, I'm going to ask you about that. What's the relationship to pain?
Yeah. So There have been many books in the past couple years that have been viral sensations about the effects of trauma on the body, because we tend to think of trauma as like an emotional experience, but we know that trauma has a profound relationship to chronic pain and pain in general. So I can say the science of why. So let me see if I can make my way through this.
Okay.
Generally speaking, trauma turns our brain into a pain megaphone. And here's why. If you have experienced a trauma, your brain knows that it didn't do a great job of protecting you last time, so it goes into overdrive to try and protect you next time. A traumatized brain is in hyperprotective mode, and that's adaptive to save your life, but it isn't so great for a couple of different things. So people with PTSD or a history of trauma often develop a symptom called hypervigilance. What does hypervigilance mean? Hypervigilance means you're just on high alert. You're hypervigilant. You're extra vigilant and aware of your surroundings. Again, something bad happened. Your brain is now on high alert, searching for danger. So if you tap someone with hypervigilance on the shoulder, they will jump bodily out of their chair. They'll have what's called an exaggerated startle response. This will sound familiar to people who are listening who have experienced a trauma, and notice their brain seems to be on high alert more often than before. Now, here's the problem. When we are in hyper alert mode, the brain is in hyper protective danger seeking mode. The brain isn't just searching our external environment for danger. Potential danger, I should say. It's also searching inside our body. So our brain is now like, similar to a tap on the shoulder, our brain is like, what about that sensation? Is that dangerous? What about this? You should pay attention to that. What about that? And so after a trauma, our brain is now magnifying completely safe sensory input from the body to get our attention and warn us that something might be wrong. So like just as when someone taps you on the shoulder, that is not dangerous, but you're jumping out of your chair anyway because your brain's magnifying the sensation, so too does it happen with sensory messages from inside our body. So if you have a prior injury or get an injury after a trauma, your brain is more likely to amplify that sensory data to warn you. And this is like a loving thing. It's not a bad thing. But of course it causes a lot of duress. But the cool thing, I always like to present like the downside with the upside. So here's the upside. The cool thing is that all of this research has been done on treatments for trauma to see how they affect chronic pain. And it turns out that when we treat our trauma, we're treating our pain. There is so much data on this. It's absolutely amazing. And it's very, very hopeful in my mind.
So many light bulbs just went off.
I'm so glad I saw it happening.
I'm short-circuiting over here. So, because I've been trying to sort of understand these connections. I've been doing the show for 6 years. I've talked to a lot of people about trauma and have seen the research about how it does magnify symptomology in menopause and all of this. I'm like, okay, I kind of get it. But so follow me through here. Like you were saying, it's sensing internally too. And I'm like, aha. So not only when your hormones, estrogen, progesterone, when they start changing, your natural defenses kind of drop too, because it changes your neurotransmitters, your serotonin, your dopamine, your cortisol goes up, like all of that stuff happens. And now, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's sensing all of the symptoms that can come up with menopause, whether that's a hot flash or whether it's a heart palpitation or whether it's anxiety and all that. And it seems to me that it could naturally amplify that if you've had trauma based on what you just said.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you just listed a lot of ingredients that are very important that occur during menopause and perimenopause that can amplify pain, right? So like there's changes in hormones, there's changes in brain chemistry, there's changes even in muscle tension because we're experiencing more anxiety and stress by and large. But on top of that, if we're someone who has had a history of trauma, our brain is stuck in sort of this hypervigilant danger mode. So it is amplifying sensory messages from the body. So, and I just want to say this clearly, like just because you're someone who has a history of trauma, it doesn't mean you're going to develop chronic pain. That's not how that goes. It's always a recipe of ingredients that create chronic pain. So I don't want to, alarm people. Like you can have a history of trauma and never have chronic pain. So it's not like one necessarily leads to the other. But I like to sort of walk through this with people who have a history of trauma and have chronic pain, and no one has ever explained this interrelationship before, because when we go to the doctor for pain, it is not likely that anyone will ever ask us about our ACEs score or our history of abuse or sexual assault. Like that often doesn't come up when it comes to chronic pain. And I just think the relationship is so profound, and the research has been out there for years, and there's thousands of papers on this, like many hundreds of thousands of papers. So it seems an important topic to broach.
Oh, it's a huge important topic to broach. And I want to talk about both of those things. You have some really lovely metaphors in the book. You talk about the pain recipe and the pain dial. Early on, you paint a picture of overlapping circles, like the biological circle and the psychological circle and the social circle, and you explain how pain lives in the middle. So I think maybe that's a nice place to start, and then we can work our way through. Yeah.
Done. Great. So we said what pain isn't. We said that we've all been sold this myth that pain is purely biomedical and requires a biomedical solution. We know it isn't working. Chronic pain is on the rise. There are more people living with chronic pain today than ever before in history. It's like 1.9 billion people around the globe, and 100 million in the US alone, and a disproportionate number of those are women. So, one of the reasons this is happening is because we continue to misunderstand pain, and that's not our fault. No one ever tells us what it is. By the way, no one's telling our doctors either. Like 96% of medical schools in the United States have 0 dedicated compulsory pain education, which is a real big problem, which maybe we'll talk about later. So let's just break down the science of what pain is. I'm going to say a word that I think is critical. And if listeners remember nothing else, I hope you remember this word. Pain isn't biomedical, but it is biopsychosocial. And what that word means, and we all suspected this all along intuitively, is that yes, there are, of course, biological components to pain. I'm going to say what they are in a moment. There are also psychological components to pain that are fraught with stigma and misunderstanding. And then we have sociological or environmental components to pain. And pain lives in the messy middle of all of those ingredients. So in the bio domain of pain, we of course have genetics, tissue damage, system dysfunction, diet, exercise, sleep. Very, very important when it comes to pain. Like nobody would disagree. But what I want us to notice is that if we're only focusing on the biodomain of pain, we are missing 2/3 of the pain problem. And that is what's happening, not just in America, but around the world. So in the psych domain of pain, we talked about emotions. We established that the parts of the brain that make pain, no, I'm going to say that better. The parts of the brain that make emotions also make pain. So to say this even better, 100% of the sensory messages from your body filter through your brain's emotion machinery before they become the thing we call pain. We all know our bodies feel worse during times of stress and duress. Anyone with depression will tell you that depression actually hurts. We all know that emotions are physical. Emotions are somatic. Like when we're stressed, our heart rate goes up, our mouth gets dry, our palms get sweaty. When we are sad, salt water leaks from our face. Emotions are physical. So like in this psychological domain of pain, emotions are a very important ingredient and we forget about them. Or if you're a woman in particular, you will be told that your pain is just due to emotions.
Right.
Which makes us all crazy. And then we have the sociological domain, which is like the everything else domain of pain. So it's socioeconomic status and access to care and race and ethnicity and social support, whether we're isolated or have a robust social system, and also trauma, like environment lives in there too. So we can see pretty clearly that pain is never due just to one thing alone. Like our brain is a prediction machine. What kind of a failure of a machine would that machine be if it only took data from like our broken big toe? It also takes data from our environment, our emotional health, our thoughts, our predictions. Like it uses all available information to decide whether or not to make pain and how much. That was a lot, but I hope it made sense.
No, it made total sense. And I was thinking in the shower as I was getting ready for this interview, actually, that it's interesting to me. Like I was a semi-professional mountain bike racer. I crashed a lot. You know, you crash on the ground, you hit the ground. And my experience of tumbling on my bike and down a mountainside would be very different from someone who had never done that. Right? Like 100% different. Like I know immediately, like, I'm okay. Or if I'm not, you know, and I know pain that will go away with a couple more pedal strokes once everything on I understand that. It's the same thing like if you put an accountant on a football field and had a linebacker run into him, he's going to feel much different pain than somebody who gets hit all the time, right?
An MMA fighter. Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I watch those guys sense. And I have a pain response just watching. I have like an empathic pain and I'm not even in the ring.
Yeah, so when we think about it in those contexts, like all of this makes total sense. And just to drill in the physical side a little bit, I'm curious. There are people who have visible things wrong, whether it be like no cartilage on their knees or whatever on a scan, and will tell you nothing hurts. And people who have seemingly healthy joints and say, boy, I can't even walk. Do we also have differences in just the hardware, in just the nerve endings? Do we know that?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Totally.
Okay.
So when I talk about this pain recipe, there's all these different ingredients in it. Like just as there's a recipe for brownies, there's always a recipe for pain. And in this pain recipe, we have all of these different biological ingredients and of course, psychological ingredients and sociological ingredients. Like we just said, pain is biopsychosocial always. And among the biological ingredients are our hardware, how our bodies are made, how we're designed. I mean, another ingredient that you just mentioned is experience and context, and that's going to be different from person to person. We also have, amazingly, different genetic sensitivity levels. Like there's a book that I happen to love. It's called The Highly Sensitive Person.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, people have heard of this. It was so revolutionary when it came out in psychology. It bridged this divide between genetics and biology and psychology. And it explained that I believe, is it 1/4 of us? 1/3 to 1/4 of us are highly sensitive people, meaning this word sensitivity has so much stigma. But what does sensitivity mean? I live in the Bay Area where we have earthquakes. You bet your ass you want a sensitive seismograph detecting whether or not there's an earthquake, because a sensitive seismograph is a highly perceptive machine, and it's better, it's superior to less sensitive seismographs. So, you know, folks who are listening who are highly sensitive people, what it means is your brain is a highly sensitive, highly tuned instrument. Like you will go into a room and notice things probably that other people don't notice. You might feel other people's emotions even though you don't want to. And, you know, being highly sensitive has pros and it has cons, but it turns out there's a genetic component to how sensitive our nervous system is. There is no one gene for pain. There is no one gene for sensitivity. There's a lot of things going on there. But one of the ingredients that you asked about is, you know, do we have different hardware? And if we have different genetics, like our sensitivity, our pain threshold will also determine how much pain we feel when we crash our bike.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Makes total sense. And when you talk about that pain recipe, I wonder if we can make an avatar. Like what if we took a woman who has hip pain, right? Like and you have like a high pain recipe and like a lower pain recipe.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does that look like?
Totally. So when my patients come to my office, I always sort of map out this recipe concept because I find it to be so empowering. And the first question I ask is, tell me about the ingredients that go into a high pain day, like a bad day. Do you know for you, like what are the ingredients that go into a bad day? I can say for me if it will help.
Oh, interesting. Are you asking me the question?
Yeah, I want to know.
Yeah. So I don't experience a ton of pain. Knock on everything. Great. I won't knock on everything. But I'm very good at talking to my pain, if you will. Like, oh, where's this coming from? Is it really is it the joint or is my muscle tight? And I can usually tease that out. But I can tell you that when I am stressed, I am more vulnerable to all of that, right? Like when I
Right.
have high stress, I am more vulnerable. Obviously, I used to do 24-hour mountain bike racing. Like, so if you have no sleep and you hit the ground, it feels different than if you're
You bet
well
it does.
rested and you hit
Yeah.
the ground. So definitely for me, there's an
Yeah.
emotional component. I mean, I can tell you that for sure.
Totally. Right. Right. So you said that perfectly. So you said two ingredients in your high pain recipe are poor sleep and high stress, and
Yep.
you're not alone. So generally when I ask my patients their high pain recipe, here's some of the things they normally say. Sitting and staring at my screen for too many hours, not protecting time to move my body or exercise, poor sleep, eating a crap diet, high stress, setting poor boundaries at work or with like toxic family members or relationships, and on and on. You can imagine there's like a lot of other
Yeah.
ingredients we can throw in here. But what I want everyone to notice is that the ingredients in the high pain recipe are biopsychosocial. There's some biological ingredients in there, there's some emotional ingredients, there's some sociological and environment ingredients in there. And that's always going to be true. But here's what's cool about a pain recipe. Just as there's a recipe for high pain, there is also a recipe for low pain. And the cool thing about mapping out our high pain ingredients is that we can look at them on a piece of paper and say, okay, I can see here that poor sleep is a high pain ingredient. So that means if I want to have a better day tomorrow, I need to work on my sleep. How do I do that? There are a lot of interventions. My favorite is called sleep hygiene. I put it in the book for that reason. There's a whole sleep hygiene protocol in Tell Me Where It Hurts. There's also a nutrition protocol. If eating a poor diet, a crap diet, for me, that's true. When I'm stressed out, I will not eat well. I will either skip meals or I will grab something fast foody because I don't have time. And people in pain often don't have time to cook, or they don't have the energy to, so sometimes we rely on poor food choices. And I also have patients who are on what I like to call the white food diet. I'm thinking in particular of a patient who was a real big fan of pizza, pasta, cereal, rice, bread, but just didn't like fruits and vegetables and so didn't eat them. And it's pretty clear that your body needs good building blocks if it's going to fight chronic pain and chronic illness,
Right.
or injuries. So what's cool about this method in my mind is that as soon as we see the high pain ingredients, we can take the steps we need to transform them to low pain ingredients and totally change our pain. And that's what I see with my patients every single day.
So when we're talking about those low pain ingredients, and we're
Yes.
talking because you also have like the pain dial, like things that turn it up and turn it down. I want
Yeah,
to
yeah.
talk about that too.
Yeah.
But like, so are the and follow me through it because this is
I'm on
a
it.
little bit of gymnastics I'm doing here. But like, so if I say something is disrupting my sleep, maybe menopause, and that's a very common thing.
Yep.
I am exhausted. I'm reaching for a lot of caffeine. I'm reaching for a lot of sugar. I'm just getting through the day only to have
Yep.
it repeat with another night of sleep. That's not great. So my inflammation is up, my cortisol is up. All these things contribute physically, right, to
Yes.
my pain.
Yes.
So are what you're doing in those other domains ultimately
Yes.
affecting the
Yes.
biology? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the thing. Everything is connected. We have this myth, that it's all disconnected. Like you have like biological, emotional, sociological here. That's not a thing. Like what is an emotion? An emotion is a neurobiological event that occurs and it affects all the systems in your human body. And it affects all the systems in the human body. So, we said this before, like if you're feeling stressed, cortisol spikes, adrenaline spikes, There are changes in neurotransmitters. There are changes in muscle tension and respiration and digestion. Like every emotion we have changes the systems in the human body that all affect pain. So all the things are interconnected, and it can sound complex, but in my mind, it's actually beautifully simple, because it means that as we look at our pain recipe, changing just one thing has the potential to change all the things because they're all interconnected.
So what, and I should have asked this early on because I actually don't know the answer to this. When someone talks about having chronic pain, is there always a thing you can pinpoint like arthritis, or is it sometimes not otherwise specified?
Chronic pain just means pain that lasts 3 months or longer, or beyond expected healing time. And the definition is obviously not great, because what is expected healing time? Like, your expected healing time is different than my expected healing time, is different than my grandmother's expected healing time. So like the definition of chronic pain isn't great, but go back to your question.
So I guess I'm wondering.
I lost the thread.
I understand that. Because it is a little nebulous. I hear
is
people
all
talk about
pain
chronic pain. Is it all pinpointed to something?
Right.
Or is it like what? I mean, I understand. Like if I
remember now. I got it.
If I've hurt my knee, then it's like longer than expected. But do some people just have pain that is not otherwise pinpointed to something?
Right. So sometimes, sometimes chronic pain is due to a disease process or a chronic illness. Sometimes, and I want to say that really carefully, I'm going to back up in just a second. And sometimes chronic pain is, due to some unresolved injury. But I want to say very clearly, chronic pain is never just about the body part. It's never just about a disease. It is constructed by the brain. And if you line up 10 people with the exact same injury, the exact same illness, they will report different pain numbers on the pain scale, like the 0 to 10 pain scale. They will all give you a different number. And the reason for that is pain is biopsychosocial always. So there are always a bunch of ingredients in every moment of every day, regardless of your diagnosis, that are either amplifying your pain or dialing pain down. So yes, there are some people who don't have specific diagnoses. They just have chronic pain, and it's called of unknown etiology. Like I have a lot of patients. That's what I was trying to get to. Yeah, yes, but so I want to say what chronic pain is, because nobody knows this, and it's so interesting, especially if you're a nerd like me and also like you. So let's talk about what chronic pain is. My patients will come to my office and they'll say, I had this knee injury 15 years ago. The tissues have obviously healed. Why do I still have pain? Here's what science says about what chronic pain is. Acute pain is pain 3 months or fewer. Like you break your ankle, when you go for a run, you stop. Your body's telling you something bad has happened. You need to pay attention. Chronic pain is a completely different animal. Chronic pain is a disease process in its own right. Chronic pain is when your brain and spinal cord, your central nervous system, have adapted and changed over time to become more sensitive and protective, as we said before, happens with trauma. And so the brain, a highly sensitive brain is now picking up and detecting and amplifying small bits of sensory data and telling you there's danger when there likely isn't. So for example, let's see, I'm going to explain this in a better way. Do you have any hobby that you were bad at, you practiced over time, and you got good at it? Any hobby or skill? Could be mountain biking, could be an instrument, anything.
Boy, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, when I started mountain biking, I went over my handlebars a lot, and then I practiced it, and I got better at it.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to say this back to you in neuroscience, nerd language. So the pathways in our brain are like the muscles in our body. The more we use those pathways, the bigger and stronger they get. So if you said to me, Zoffness, I want really big biceps. I would say, Celine, of course you do. Who doesn't want big biceps? Go to the gym and lift lots of weights, and over time, your biceps will get big and strong. The same is true for the brain. The more we practice any skill, whether it's mountain biking or playing the piano, the bigger and stronger the pathways dedicated to that skill becomes. So, when we inadvertently practice pain for months and years, the pain pathway in the brain gets really big and strong. And when that happens, we say that the brain has become sensitive to pain, which again just means it's taking small bits of sensory data and amplifying it to get your attention. So that process is called central sensitization. And neuroscientists believe that it underlies all forms of chronic pain to some degree or another, regardless of the diagnosis. So yes, there are different diagnoses that can lead to chronic pain, but chronic pain in and of itself is a disease of the central nervous system. And again, I promised that I will always follow something ominous with something hopeful. And we know that there are so many strategies we can use to target the brain and help it become a less sensitive danger detector to help pain volume go down. Like there are so many things we can do. Yeah.
Excellent. And
yep.
I want to roll into those. I should have said swimming is what I should have said, because
swimming. That's
I was always kind of good at mountain biking. I just rode above my skill level for a long time because I was good at it. Swimming I was terrible at. And I got lessons and I practiced, and swimming is just a better metaphor because you really have to practice it. It's all technique.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can get rusty at it too then when you don't practice. Kind of like golf.
Of course. Yeah.
Same thing.
Like anything.
Yeah. So let's talk about what turns that pain dial down.
Right. I mean, so again, it depends on the person in front of me. I try not to make sweeping statements, but one of the most important things I have found and research has found to help turn pain volume down, ironically, is movement. So when we have pain typically, especially acute pain, which is that short-term pain, it tells us to stop moving. It tells us to stay inside, to not use our body, to not ride our bike. And that is adaptive and life-saving. Like, I don't want you running on that broken leg. If you go over your handlebars, I do not want you, if you have a concussion, don't get back on that bike. Like, when pain is acute, it's often a sign that your body is in danger and you need help and rest. However, we've established chronic pain is a different animal entirely. The brain and nervous system have become highly sensitive. How do you desensitize a highly sensitive pain system? The way I like to think about it is like if you've ever gone to the movies and you've sat in the dark for a long time and your eyes have adapted and adjusted to the dark, if you suddenly throw on all the lights and open all the blinds, you're like, oh, it's blinding, I'm in so much pain. And we don't want to do that to someone in pain. What we want to do is slowly increase stimulation and activity. So like if you're in that dark room and you open the blinds just a tiny bit, a little light comes in and gradually your eyes and your brain adapt to the light, not painful. Open the blinds a little bit more, your eyes, your brain adapt, not painful. And soon, slowly over time, you're in a light-filled room and you're okay. And I like to think of that metaphor when I think about how we're treating chronic pain. So there's a skill that I also put in the book. It's called pacing. And pacing for pain is much like pacing for a marathon. You are not getting out of bed tomorrow and running 26 miles. That is a disaster, at least for someone like me. We're meeting you exactly where you are. We're starting exactly where you can start. For some of my patients, that means getting out of bed, walking downstairs, and standing on the porch for 5 minutes in the sun. For some of my patients who are operating at a higher level, even though they have chronic pain, it's walking for 20 minutes a day or running for 20 minutes a day. And we're going to gradually increase our activity over time. And we're going to take breaks. We're going to breathe. We're going to drink water. We're going to stretch. We're going to pet the neighbor's dogs. But we're going to gradually over time increase our movement and our sensory input. And what science shows is that over time, that reduces pain volume in the brain. It's a highly effective strategy. Pacing for pain is something that I recommend to everyone.
What are the mechanisms there? Do we know?
The mechanisms behind pacing?
Yeah, behind extra, I know that through experience and it makes intuitive sense. I'm wondering what the what the
Oh, yeah.
mechanism is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, movement does so much to the body. Like they say motion is lotion, and that's really true. Like motion lubricates our joints. It helps strengthen our muscles. It releases endogenous opioids in the brain. You know, it does all of these important things that turn pain volume down. And the opposite occurs when we're sedentary and we don't move. Like usually people with chronic pain get stuck in this cycle where we have pain, so we don't move. And the less we move, the stiffer our joints become, the more painful movement becomes, the more our muscles atrophy. And then because movement has become more painful, we move less. And now because we're moving less, we hurt more. And the less we move, the more we hurt. The more we hurt, the less we move. And it's a vicious and toxic cycle. So in my mind, breaking that cycle is one of the first and foremost things that I do. And the other reason I think movement is so critically important when you talk about mechanisms, I always recommend to my patients that we start by going outside, even if we're just standing outside in the sun, even if we're just going for a walk around the block, because what does that do? It gives us sunlight, which bumps again, endorphins and dopamine and serotonin. It gives us exposure to humans, like our neighbors. We can say hi. That can give us a hit of dopamine and serotonin and endorphins, all of which lower pain volume. We can pet the neighbor's dog. We are engaged in the world. So that is important medicine too. And I think we forget that.
Yeah, I think we definitely do. It is interesting too that very, very few things, if any, like when you have surgery and whatever, they get you up and moving very quickly these days.
Oh, yeah, it's the best.
There's no bed rest. You know, I mean, everyone's like, up.
You got to move.
You got to move.
Totally. And I want to say something that I haven't said before that I always want to say. Medications and surgery are life-saving. I am not opposed to them. They are an important part of the pain recipe when we're talking about treatment. We are not skipping medications. We are not skipping procedures. They can save lives. The issue is when we only rely on those things, especially if those things haven't worked for us in the past and we keep relying on them. So I think the message is like, there's so many more things we can do to change our pain beyond pills and procedures, but that's not to say those don't work and can't work. They obviously do. Like, thank God we're not biting on wooden spoons during surgery anymore.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And we have run into a lot of trouble with pain medications.
Oh, dude. Have we ever?
Have we ever? And even the ones that are, or we used to think, like vitamin I, everybody should take ibuprofen. And boy, that has caused trouble with people's kidneys. Totally. And it's not good for you.
No, it's not great. Yeah. I mean, pharma is finally being taken to task to the tune of something like $54 billion for lying to us and selling us this myth that, chronic opioids are safe for people with pain. In fact, what we now know is that chronic opioid use can, not always, but can lead to more pain, because chronic opioids, you're going to love this one, opioids over time make your pain system more sensitive to pain. It's called opioid-induced hyperalgesia. It's a known thing. Opioids make your brain more sensitive to pain over time.
Oh,
yes,
boy.
It's true. Yeah, well, that's why getting off opioids is so
painful.
Terrible.
Like literally painful. Yeah.
It's terrible. Oh, it's terrible. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I mean, it's terrible.
Just leave that right there, because that always makes me want to burn the world down, and we're not. This is what this podcast is about right now.
No, we're lifting it up.
Yes, we are lifting it up.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit more about, you have a lot of healing protocols and in your book. I want to talk about some of the other tools. You have an emotional health protocol, cognitive strategies, obviously important, social medicine. When you say that there's like this pain epidemic, I think, well, there's also a loneliness and isolation epidemic, and those two things have to be going hand in hand. So talk a bit more about some of the big levers, in the book and the things that you pull.
Well, let's talk about social medicine, because you brought it up. And I worry that people roll their eyes when they hear about social medicine, because it sounds a little hokey. It sounds a little Pollyanna, but I want to say the science behind it. So among the worst punishments you can give a human being is solitary confinement. 100%. Now, What does it say about human beings that one of the worst things you can do to us is isolate us from others? We are evolutionarily designed to be social animals. Why? Because being social confers support, protection from predators. You're more likely to have food and water and shelter. You have individuals around you to take care of you when you're sick or giving birth or dying. And you are more likely to survive if you have a tribe. We are genetically programmed to be social. And it is so fundamental to humans to be social that our brains literally reward us for engaging in social behavior. When we are around others, our brains bump out chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, which is a chemical of bonding and connectivity, and also, again, endorphins, our endogenous homemade opioids. So when we are in the presence of others, we feel better, both physically and emotionally. And when we are isolated, all of those chemicals crash and we feel terrible physically and emotionally. That's data point number one that I found was so fascinating. Data point number two, rates of morbidity and mortality, that is, rates of disease and death, are significantly higher in the elderly population among those who are lonely and isolated. Why? Being isolated, because it's so fundamental to being human, is a huge stressor on the human body. When we are chronically lonely, when we are chronically isolated, our bodies bump out high levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Over time, cortisol suppresses our immune system. That means if we are healthy, we're more likely to get sick. If we are sick, we are likely to get sicker. We are also more likely to die. And Vivek Murthy, our former US Surgeon General, did this incredible study on loneliness and health. And he surveyed like decades of research and, along with many others, confirmed for us that loneliness is a predictor of chronic illness and chronic pain. I mean, the relationships are profound. They are out there. Research supports them. No one doubts this anymore. It isn't pseudoscience. It's out there in the front of medicine. But what that means is when we're talking about chronic pain, we also want to be thinking about social medicine. Like, toxic relationships are actually toxic. They're toxic for our brains. They're toxic for our bodies. If they trigger high stress, they're not good for our pain. Like, what boundaries are we setting around toxic relationships? Similarly, what efforts are we making to cultivate positive and healthy relationships? Are we surrounded by people who support us and lift us up? How do we find more of those people? What social activities are we engaging in? Are we leaving our homes and going to places with other people like cafes? Are we joining gyms? Where are we going where we can be in the company of others? So there's a lot of things we can look at in our pain recipes to sort of change our social medicine.
Where do phones fit in this picture?
So many different places. Where do we even begin?
Yeah. I mean, it's got to not be, there's got to be some issues because all the things you were talking about with cortisol and isolation. And I mean, we know the algorithms are keen to keep us angry and
activated.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, don't be on screens. We're all addicted to our screens, me included.
Totally.
It's so gnarly. Like when I think about screen addiction is real. It's really intense. So yes, screens are a problem for a number of reasons. They give us a false sense of being social. Like being on social media and posting posts and responding to people is not being social. That is not the same as being in a room full of people, having a glass of wine or eating a good meal and laughing and telling stories. Not the same thing. Screens are bad for our sleep. The blue light suppresses melatonin. It affects our sleep quality and duration. Screens are a distractor from engaging in life. I have a lot of chronic pain patients who are just on screens all day. And that's something you can do when you have pain. So there's no shame in this game, but we want to be really careful about how much we're relying on screens and how much power we're giving screens over our lives because they can really wreak havoc.
Yeah. Yeah. Good advice. So what other cognitive strategies do you employ? I mean, we talk a lot, and I always have a little bit of, I don't know, a little hesitation when I talk about cognitive behavioral therapy because it's like it rolls off the tongue and everyone's like, what is that even? And it sounds like I need to go to a specialist and it's a lot of work. Do you talk about that in your practice?
So two separate things. There's cognitive strategies for pain, but I separate that out from CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. So CBT, if people are interested, people have heard of it by now. CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy is the most evidence-based treatment for anxiety and depression and some other things too.
It works for
And
hot flashes too. It goes
what?
right up there. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I can share that with you. It often performs as well as hormone therapy and randomized control in trials with
My jaw
because
is hitting the floor. How does that work? How does CBT work
it's
for
the
hot
same
flashes?
thing. And because there's a serotonin, there's a because hot flashes come from the brain. They come from the hypothalamus. So like
my
there's
God.
there's a lot that happens there. I'll send you some research. It's
I
fascinating.
want to read it. I had no idea you could use CBT for hot flashes. I mean, that sort of makes sense because everything's connected. So in CBT, what therapists do is they target, because I've used this before, they target a lot of ingredients in like an anxiety recipe or a depression recipe. So for example, when we're anxious, we have a tendency to think really anxious thoughts. Oh my God, this bad thing's going to happen.
That's me. I spiral. Woo!
Yeah,
I go
exactly.
catastrophic quick.
Right. And so there's a cycle here that we try to break with CBT. So when we think anxious thoughts, here's what happens. We think an anxious thought, oh my God, this terrible bad thing's going to happen. What happens? The thought affects our emotions. We start feeling stressed, anxious, panicky, out of control. When we think those thoughts and feel those feelings, we then behave or act in a certain way. So for example, if I'm thinking, oh my God, this terrible thing's going to happen if I do this thing, then I avoid the thing. I don't do the thing. Avoidance is really common with anxiety. So you're thinking the negative thought, you're feeling the negative feeling, you're engaging in avoidance behaviors. All of this also affects your body. So say what you're avoiding is physical activity. If you're thinking, oh my God, this, if I do this thing, it's going to cause lots of pain. You're feeling anxious and stressed. You avoid physical activity. And then of course, pain gets worse. And then you are thinking even more anxious thoughts and feeling more anxious feelings. So it becomes a cycle where your thoughts affect your emotions, affect your body, affect your behaviors. And in CBT, we try and break that cycle. So cognitive behavioral therapy can be extremely effective for chronic pain. There's a protocol called the CBT-CP protocol, cognitive behavioral therapy for chronic pain. It is different than just regular CBT. Like if you're someone living with anxiety and depression and you're going to a therapist for CBT, it's going to be a different brand of intervention than you would get if you're going to someone specifically for a chronic pain protocol. Does that make sense?
Totally, because they have
Okay.
it for insomnia too. We've
Yeah.
done shows on
Yes.
CBTI, which is CBT.
I love CBTI. I have used it. I recommend it. I think it's amazing. Yeah. Right. So there's different forms of CBT and really they go after different ingredients in different recipes like anxiety, depression, insomnia, chronic pain, trauma, a lot of different things.
What is the time course for someone who comes to you and you start working with them? Is there, and I know it depends, 100% it depends, but
Yeah.
like, how, is there any level of expectation that somebody can have or do they become, like, how do you keep them from becoming more vigilant? Do you know what I mean? Like like when you start working with someone now you're really paying attention. Am I feeling better? I don't know. How do you, how do you prepare someone for that journey?
Okay.
I guess.
So I'm going to answer both of those questions. I don't know if there's a typical time course, but what I look for in my patients is meaningful change over the course of the first 3 months. Like I want to know, And I look at functional indicators a lot, like are you getting out of bed more? Are you able to engage in pleasurable hobbies and activities a little bit more? Is your sleep a little bit better? So like I want to look at those things because all of those things will contribute to pain. So I focus a little bit less on the pain number at the beginning. And I also want to say like, I wish there was a magic bullet for pain. I wish that I could say like, yes, in 3 sessions, you will feel better. And that's why people buy shit. That's why people like buy snake oil, because people who are selling snake oil will promise you that you will feel better if you just take this supplement, if you just take this pill, if you just do this protocol. But like treating chronic pain is a whole person problem that requires a whole person solution. And I wish it were quick and dirty. Generally speaking, it isn't. I have seen amazing things happen in the walls of my office, but generally speaking, it's not like a miracle. Usually it's just not. But to your other question about how do you prevent people from becoming more vigilant? People with chronic pain are already pretty vigilant about the body part that hurts. And that's actually one of the ingredients in the recipe. And as you mentioned, the more vigilant we are, the more the brain zooms in on that body part to check on it. Because attention, which is regulated by the prefrontal cortex, works sort of like a magnifier. Like the more we focus on a sensation, the more the prefrontal cortex zooms in on that body part to examine it. Like, is everything okay here? Mm-hmm. And the more it zooms in, the more we feel the sensation. So like, again, like for anyone listening, I want you to pay attention to both of your arms. How are your arms doing? Are you suddenly noticing your arms because I'm talking about your arms and you're thinking about your arms? I bet before you had absolutely no idea how your arms were feeling. Why? You weren't paying attention. So your prefrontal cortex was zoomed out and you were listening to this interesting podcast. So when we zoom in on a body part, we feel it more. So one of the strategies we like to use in treatment with patients is a strategy, a cognitive strategy called distraction. Mm-hmm. Distraction is great for pain flares. It is not a panacea. There is no magic that can distract you from your pain permanently. No, pain's job is to get your attention. However, a little story. I was standing in my kitchen. I was on the phone. I was very distracted. I was late. I was supposed to be going to a friend's birthday party. I had put a pan in the toaster oven. It was sitting on the counter. It was still very hot. I forgot. I grabbed it with my fingers and man, did that hurt. Dropped it to the ground, started screaming, did the little dance you do when you're in a lot of pain, did all the things you're supposed to do for a burn, remembered that I was late for my friend's birthday party, hopped in a cab with like ointment on my fingers. They were throbbing, absolutely throbbing the entire cab ride there. Got to the bar where she was having her party, sat down at a table with her and a bunch of friends, started talking, started eating some snacks. Absolutely, completely forgot about my pain. Real pain, by the way. My fingers were bright red. Yes. And completely forgot about my pain and didn't notice it again until I got in the cab to go home. I grabbed the handle of the taxi and I was like, oh! And because I was distracted, like my brain, all the parts of my brain that normally would focus on pain were focusing on other things. Because when we talk about pain as a biopsychosocial experience, attention is one of the ingredients in our pain recipe. So there are strategies we can use during a pain flare to help our brain dial away from the pain and dial pain down.
That makes total sense. And as you were talking about all of that, I was thinking about marathoning because there's a couple of things that happen in marathoning. One, in the taper week leading into the marathon, all of a sudden, my ankle hurts. This hurt. Like you get this random pain that because you're not running and training and you're just like hyper focused on making sure that none of your joints hurt because you're going to run 26 miles. And then when you are out there running, like a lot of times, like I would just be like, it's mile 19 and literally everything hurts. Like, okay, what doesn't hurt? Well, my earlobes don't hurt. I am going to think about my ears. You just start thinking about whatever it is. And it works because 100% when you zone in on that thing, you can make anything feel much worse than.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's such a good point. I didn't think about that. Next time I'm hurting, I'll think about my earlobes.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's just, and that takes you to, I mean, we could talk all day, but that also takes you to knowing, as athletic people, we tend to know good pain, not good, bad pain. Like or neutral pain, like the
Yes.
pain that you're just stiff and it will go away as soon as
Yeah.
I warm up. Everything is going to be fine.
Yeah.
From this seems like something that I should pay attention to this is actually good. I mean, you just get this relationship with
Yes.
pain that
Totally. Yeah, you become sort of a
yeah
pain expert and an expert on your own body. And you said
yeah
something earlier in the podcast that I meant to flag that was so fascinating and so important, which was, after you've gone over your handlebars a bunch of times, you start learning like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. My body's not in danger. I know these feelings. I know these sensations. I'm a little scratched up. I'm a little bumped, but like my body's okay. Nothing dangerous and bad is happening. The second you think that thought, pain volume starts going down. The brain is a prediction machine. When we make negative predictions, pain alarm amplifies. This is like a well-established, well-known thing. And so, for me, I am not an athlete. I am a bookworm and I have lived in the library my whole life. I love exercising. I am just not very athletic. I'm just not designed that way. And I love riding my bike. And I went on a cycling trip with my husband a couple of years ago. And we were coming down a mountain and it was covered with scree and gravel. And I hit my brakes a little too hard and I went over my handlebars. I don't think I've ever been so scared. I was positive in that moment that I was going to, I don't know. I remember thinking like, do I have brain damage? Am I still alive? Like I was like feeling my body, like, am I okay? I didn't know. And the fear I was feeling in that moment and like the fearful predictions I was making for sure were amplifying my pain alarm. I was fine. I was, I was bruised and I had bloody palms. Now I wear gloves. But when we can tell ourselves that our body is safe, pain volume will go down. Why? Pain is our body's danger alarm. So any evidence of danger will amplify the brain's pain alarm. Credible evidence of safety will lower the brain's pain alarm. So if you've been doing a thing for a long time and you can tell your brain and body, no, I'm safe. I know I'm safe. That will help the pain alarm dampen. But if you're unfamiliar with a thing or something is scary and you have an injury or a new diagnosis and you're terrified, and especially if you're predicting bad things, pain volume will scream. So it's just such an important point you made that like, if you can help your brain and body feel safe in any given moment, you will help your pain. And we see that with kids, right? Like
I was just going to say that. You see when a kid hits their head and then they look and they're like, am
I okay?
Right. And you're like, you're fine. Or they,
Right.
if you have a face, then all of a sudden they burst into tears. Yeah.
That is a known thing. And I use that example all the time of how pain is social. Like the first thing a kid does when they fall on the playground, they look at their parent's face. And if the parent is like, oh my God, and is high distress, the child will cry. If a parent is calm and kisses the boo-boo and says, you're okay, let's go back to playing, and distracts the child, they are less likely to cry. 100%. So like again, another factor that changes pain volume. And part of that is this toggling between safety and danger. The more safe we feel, the more we kiss the boo-boo and say, oh, you're okay, let's go back to playing. The less loud the pain alarm is likely to be. The more convinced you are that your body is in danger, the bigger your alarm response, the higher the pain alarm. It's intuitive. It sort of makes sense, right? It feels so intuitive. Yeah.
100% intuitive. And I think a good place to land the plane here, because I could talk to you all day, is that when you talk about that safety and that safe environment, a lot of that comes from taking also care of yourself, right? Like, so sleeping, nourishing yourself, the movement, the sunshine, the light. If you are going in, if you're in menopause and it's causing havoc, taking the therapeutic steps to get that havoc under control, like all of that is creating a safe environment for your brain.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And I really like the way you just said that. So all of those ingredients together, like we have some control over so many things. Some things we don't have control over. You go over your handlebars, you're bloody and bruised. Okay, that has happened. Now, what are the things I can control? I can control how I take care of those injuries. I can control sleep and I can control nutrition. I can control social support. I can control who I'm surrounding myself with. To a certain degree, I can control stressors to a certain degree. Like I cannot doom scroll before bed. That's something I can do, you know.
Yeah.
I can start saying no. I'm someone who says yes to everything. I can start saying no to things and protect time for my sanity, protect time to exercise and engage in pleasurable hobbies and activities. So there are many places where we can make change and help our bodies feel safe.
Well, I really appreciate the work that you've done, and I will put links in the show notes so people can find you, they can find the book. Thank you so much for doing this work and for getting this message out there, because I think I know because I practice it, once you start engaging with pain and in this way, it really is transformational.
Agree. I absolutely agree. And I appreciate what you're doing to spread the word about women's health. I think it's really important and not talked about enough.
Amen to that. Thanks so much. I hung up on you way too quick. You had one more thing to say. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if people are interested in this work or want to learn more about pain, there's a million places to find the research. So I have a nerdy website. It's just my last name, Zoffness.com. And there's a resources section with 4 bazillion papers, academic papers, podcasts, guided audio for pain, book recommendations, workbooks, links, like literally anything you could ever want. And the book is called Tell Me Where It Hurts, and it's wherever you get books. I have been told that people are seeing it in airports. My friends are sending me pictures of bookstores when they find it in bookstores, but it's on bookshop.org and Amazon. And I hope people will find it useful and helpful for the people they love with pain and for their healthcare providers and for themselves.
Amen. Thank you so much again. Well, that is our show. Come on back next week when I sit down with Haley Babcock of Haley Happens Fitness, who is going through it with perimenopause. It's a raucous one that you will not want to miss, so come on back for that. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You have been listening to Hit Play Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the most amazing Carrie Barrett and the other talented, strong women at Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause. And please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. And please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.